Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Azula loses her bender and married to Naruto? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the RaiderXV for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. Azula knew that things had gone bad. After working with several of the fire sages and that annoying girl, Katara, even Aang put in some time to try to bring back her sanity. Surprisingly, it had worked. She still felt anger, but she had learned to control it better. She also knew what was coming and actually longed for it, the removal of her bending ability. Aang had told her that it was for her safety and for the safety of others. She had nothing to lose anyways. Her life was basically over. She was to be held for the rest of her life, unless she could prove that she had reformed. While she was on the way to no longer being a monster, as her mother had put it, she had a long ways to go to become an acceptable human. After a session with Aang, she felt very calmed and almost at peace. She welcomed the ending of what she was before. A couple days later, several maidens came in and got her ready, so that they could adorn her with her royal garb. She allowed the women to dress, bathe, and clothe her. She then, with a regal air about herself, accompanied the guards to the main compound. She was struck that there was a pedestal with chains on the sides. She thought that she might have to go through a beheading, but she saw the avatar there with a sad smile. This is what they had agreed upon. She would lose her bending for a lesser sentence, a few years in prison. She knelt and allowed the guards to shackle her. At least they gave me a pillow to kneel on, she thought to herself. Aang looked at her and asked, "Do you have any questions?" She shook her head and he continued, "It would be easiest for everyone if you don't fight me when I do this." "Okay," she nodded and gave him a tired smile. The guards opened her robe a little, but not enough to expose her, just enough to allow Aang to touch her on the chest. He then touched her chest with one hand and her head with the other. Then the agony began. She began to scream, but wasn't even sure if she could be heard. Then all she saw was red. A beam of red light came from Azula's eyes and moved down her body until she was encompassed in the crimson light, while Aang was bathed in blue light. Suddenly the red light then moved up Aang and started to cover his body. It made it as far as his neck before reversing direction. It then moved to Azula's body, but it was slightly tinged purple, but still in the blue spectrum. It finally covered her, but as the light faded, so did Azula. All that was left were her clothes, no body or hair. All that was left were the empty shackles. Aang looked at the empty clothes in horror. He didn't know what to do, but suddenly blackness took him. Konoha Forest near the academy. Naruto woke up from just having saved a young girl from something or other. As expected, both the girl and the boys he had protected her from were gone. He slowly got to his feet and leaned against the tree for a minute to catch his breath. He hated it when people picked on others. He then noticed a hand sticking out of the bushes and became fearful that the boys had killed the girl. He quickly moved and found a girl lying on the ground without any clothes. He quickly pulled off his dirty shirt and put it on the girl. He then positioned the girl so that he could carry the girl on his back. He quickly made his way towards the Hokage Tower. He ran up the steps and past several chunin. He also saw several civilians and just ignored them. The chunin at the door saw him carrying someone on his back and was straining at the effort. He quickly opened the door and allowed the boy entry. The boy smiled at the chunin, who just seemed to ignore the boy. "Thanks," he exclaimed as he passed into the Hokage's office. He stopped at the side of the Hokage's desk and said while still trying to catch his breath, "Hey Gigi. I found her after some kids were trying to beat up some pale-eyed girl. I stopped them, but they got the best of me. But I found her, can I keep her?" The Hokage laughed at the question, but then looked at the girl on the boy's back. "Naruto-kun, where did you find her? And what was she wearing?" he asked. "She wasn't wearing anything, so I put my shirt on her. Can you take her? She's getting kind of heavy," Naruto explained. The Hokage stood and grabbed the girl from his arms and saw the boy sigh in relief. "Let's get her to the hospital and have her checked out," he said, the enthusiastic boy. He placed his hand on the boy and both disappeared from the room. "That was neat," Naruto exclaimed and asked, "Can we do it again?" The Hokage chuckled and then took both children over to the desk. I would like both of these children checked out now," he exclaimed to the nurse at the station. She nodded and replied, "At once, Hokage-sama." She then pulled a gurney over and had the Hokage place the girl on the gurney, and Naruto jumped up with her. The nurse glared at the boy, but said nothing. She then wheeled the gurney into the emergency exam room. "Now stay here, the boy, and someone will come to check you both out," the nurse explained in a bittersweet voice. Naruto got bored quickly and began to look around. He saw the girl moan in what seemed to be pain. He got worried and moved up beside her and yelled, "She's in pain, someone come and help her." He then turned to the girl and said kindly, "Someone is coming, so just hold on, it hurts so much. Please stop. It isn't working," the girl mumbled under her breath. She then grabbed her head and began to cry out in pain. Naruto began to worry about the girl and put her head on his lap. He began to move her hair gently to the side and moving his fingers in circles on her forehead. This seemed to relax the girl. The Hokage looked on and smiled warmly at the scene. It took about 10 minutes for a doctor to come, and he quickly looked at Naruto and said, "You need to step outside the curtain while I check on the girl." "Please, Naruto," the doctor asked kindly. Naruto smiled and nodded to the doctor. He got up and moved outside the curtain. The doctor then closed the curtain and began her exam. Naruto saw a light green glow through the curtain. After a few minutes, the doctor opened the curtains and then smiled warmly at Naruto and said, "You did good to bring her to the Hokage and then here, Naruto-kun. So what is your prognosis, Kikyo-sensei?" Sarutobi asked the doctor. "She is suffering from exhaustion and straining of her chakra coils. There were also no signs of abuse of any type," Kikyo explained. Sarutobi nodded and saw that Naruto was confused. He smiled and patted the boy on the head. "She is okay. We just had to make sure." "So you were telling me about another girl, Naruto-kun?" he asked, in an attempt to change the subject. "Well, some boys were picking on her. She was in a black outfit and had these weird eyes. They seemed either white or gray," Naruto explained. "Ah, she must have been a Hyuga. You saved one of the Hyuga clan's girls before you found this girl. You're quite the hero today, Naruto-kun," Sarutobi said in praise for the boy. He then continued, "I will need you taken you to the site where you found her." "That is fine, Hokage-sama, but I need to check out Naruto-kun first," Kikyo said authoritatively. She turned to Naruto and said, "Now get up on the gurney, so I can get you checked out." After a couple minutes of examining him, she ruffled his hair and said, "Other than the normal scrapes and bruises you get when you tangle with the other children, you're fine. I recommend a night here and then you can go home." Naruto smiled sadly and then said, "But what about her? I'm worried that she doesn't have anybody." Kikyo smiled warmly at the boy, but then replied, "We will find out who the girl is and then let you know, but for tonight you two can share a room and you can keep an eye on her. Would you like that?" Naruto nodded emphatically. Naruto turned away when the doctor began to dress the girl in some hospital clothing. Kikyo smiled at how the boy reacted and was quite proud of him. She then had them transferred to his room and had them in separate beds. She would check on him every so often and also delivered a few books to try to keep him busy until he fell asleep. Later that evening, she found him sleeping with a book draped over his chest and smiled warmly at the scene. She checked in about 20 minutes later and found the girl standing next to Naruto's bed looking at him intently. They quickly whirled and got into a taijutsu stance that Kikyo didn't recognize, so she put her hands up defensively and said, "I'm glad to see that you're awake. What is so interesting about Naruto-kun?" The girl looked quizzically up at Kikyo and replied, "What did you say? I can't understand you." Kikyo was confused, in that she and the girl weren't speaking the same language and neither would be able to understand the other until they could get some mutual understanding. "I know this is all confusing, but we will figure out what is going on. My name is Kikyo," she said, as she placed her hand on her chest and moved towards the chair, since she figured this would be a long night. "My name is Azula, and why am I in this room with this boy?" she replied angrily. "You're Azula? He is Naruto," Kikyo explained, while she motioned towards Naruto. Azula glanced at the boy sleeping on the bed and turned back to the woman in the room to make sure that she didn't pull anything. Azula slipped her hand onto the boy, only to see the woman gasp. But Azula only grabbed the book and looked at it. The characters were similar to what she was used to, but if she read it correctly, this makes no sense. The characters must mean something else, she thought to herself, while keeping an eye on the woman in the chair. Azula put the book beside the boy, who she guessed was named Naruto. What a weird name. Kikyo raised a hand to let the ANBU member to know that the girl was not to be harmed, at least for now. The girl noticed this and looked around. Azula moved her hand in a circle and a blue flame appeared to illuminate the room. Both Kikyo and the ANBU were surprised to see a girl around Naruto's age able to manipulate fire so easily. Kikyo put up her hands and began to plead with the girl. "He isn't a threat to you and neither are we. Wait, you can't understand me, but I hope my message is getting through to you." Azula saw the woman who, in her opinion, identified herself as Kikyo become very defensive and worried when she began to bend fire. She looked at the boy sleeping and thought that the woman was trying to protect the boy. Azula wasn't sure what was going on, but she knew that she wasn't home. But also either the woman before her nor the person in the mask had made any move to harm her, so she doused the fire in her palm. "Please explain to me, what is going on?" Azula turned to see two worried blue eyes from the boy who was asleep, but she felt him grab onto her arm, just after she became dizzy. He pulled her to the side of the bed. "Why did you do that?" she asked, but not thinking he would answer. "Because I will always save you," he answered, but she could tell it from his eyes that he wouldn't leave her, and right now she needed something to grasp onto. He pulled her into a hug, but she noticed that he became rigid when she returned the simple gesture. She vowed then that this boy would be the one that she would use to help her understand this world. After his discharge, Naruto would spend quite a bit of his free time with the girl that talked funny. He became more involved in learning, since his new friend needed to learn how to speak his language, and for her part she would teach him some of hers. The first month in the hospital was frustrating, but eventually they were able to carry on simple conversations, but the girls seemed to be mean to those around them, all except for him, for some reason that he couldn't fathom. After the month she was moved into the apartment next to him. He would occasionally watch her while she would practice a weird style of taijutsu. He did notice her mannerism had lightened and was still somewhat cold to others, but for the most part she was kind to him and seemed to be getting kinder. After seeing his interest in her and not because she was just a girl, she began to teach him her kata and he would talk to her about what he learned in school. This brought on several trips to the library and eventually her entry into the academy in his class, no less than a month later. She did make him put some distance between himself and several of the girls in the class. She didn't like the way they or others were treating him. Also, as much as it pained her at the moment, she told him to say that she was his girlfriend, even though he was only 8. This gave him some modicum of happiness, but also it kept the boys at bay, especially the Inuzuka boy, even though the boy was only 8. It didn't miss her observant eyes that the Hyuga girl kept stealing glances at Naruto. It wasn't like she cared all that much about who liked the boy, but she was beginning to have some feelings towards him. How couldn't she? The boy was the kindest person and seemed to care for her without asking for anything in return. He also proved to be very ignorant, not truly stupid, but he needed a lot of work. She didn't like how the village treated him, and would listen in on what they would say around him. She also spent several nights comforting the boy after the occasional tongue lashing or a beating from the other children. Her eyes were open to just how cruel she was when she was the princess of the Fire Nation by what was happening. She kept most of her information to herself though, but she informed the Hokage and Naruto about the truth. The fact that she was a 14-year-old girl trapped in the body of an 8-year-old body didn't seem to faze her for some reason. Although she wasn't happy about having to revisit puberty, and all the fun that would be for her, she thought to herself. She also got the Hokage and Naruto to agree to a marriage contract between herself and Naruto. Azula got Naruto to agree, by using his wanting to be needed and telling him that others more than likely would mistreat her, while he would be a loving husband. She figured that the council and the elders of the village would force her into a marriage that wouldn't be to her benefit. She also figured out Naruto's secret in the next couple months. She then devoted herself to learning sealing and what could be garnered from such an endeavor. She, like Naruto, found the academy to be boring, but also believed that the lack of early instruction had hurt her Naruto, and now he was behind and didn't have the resources to catch up. Without her help, that is, so she meant to fix this. She would spend the evenings with Naruto training and teaching him what was needed to pass class. She also figured out why he was having such a problem with a simple clone technique. It was simple, he had too much chakra. She had approached the teacher, Irika, about chakra control exercises, but most were boring in Naruto's opinion, so she would incorporate them into the pair's evening training schedule, mostly as cool-down exercises. This was mostly effective. If that failed to catch his attention, she would help him plan pranks on those who would be mean to him, or just to test their skills. Irika was pleased that Naruto seemed to be more responsive during class, at least somewhat, but also was having problems dealing with his prankster attitude. It didn't help that Azula seemed to enjoy when Naruto would pull his Y technique on adult males that annoyed him. He was almost sure that Azula had posed nude for him, so as to try to help him with the technique, but he couldn't prove it. Azula, for her part, wouldn't tell Irika or the Hokage whether she had posed for Naruto. She, for her part, enjoyed his Y or centerfold technique, because of what it would do to most males, especially perverts, while she did deserve some part of the blame for the technique, since she did pose nude for her fiancé a few times. She figured it wouldn't do to have him embarrassed to see her in the nude when they eventually wanted to have children. She knew that Naruto was too young to be a pervert just yet, but she wanted him to be hers, thus making it easier to control and thus protect him. Over the next few months, her feelings for the boy intensified. She also shared what she had learned about Naruto with the boy. This was the source of both a joyous and nerve-wracking night for both of them. She had broken the news to him about his being a Jinchuriki, and that it was the reason for his treatment by the villagers. She also explained that it didn't change a thing between them. She still cared deeply for the boy who saved her and stuck with her when others grew too frustrated with her and gave up. There was a single incident that helped galvanize his wanting to help Naruto. He had wandered out of the village to check out a dead body of a shinobi from another village on a bet. Azula had alerted him to this, as soon as she had gotten into the class, and it was verified by Shikamaru. Irika and Kakashi spent the good portion of an afternoon retrieving the errant Naruto. This resulted in a tongue lashing from both Irika and Azula. The boy who dared Naruto didn't escape unscathed either. They would have to deal with pranks for a month, much to their and their parents' regrets. Azula's cruel side showed through with these pranks. Most caused pain and none were life-threatening, but it did attract the attention of the Hokage, so she had to stop her assault on the boys. She admitted to him that while she wasn't sure what to call the feelings she had, but she called it love. The news of a girl loving him was too much, and the floodgates of emotion opened and they spent the night in each other's arms. It would have been cute if someone else had seen it, but alas, no one else knew. They both woke to the other in her bed, where they had been the night before. She leaned in and kissed the boy, a surprise to both of them. It was light and quick, but seemed to last forever for the two of them. She made him promise to not tell anyone about either him learning about the QB being sealed within him, or their first kiss. Over the next year, the boy, Sasuke, had a tragedy happen. His family had been killed by his older brother. Naruto tried to approach the boy, only to be challenged by his fan club. This confrontation brought a smile to the faces of two girls, Azula and Hinata. The training with Azula had done wonders for his reaction speed, timing, and his technique. The pink-haired girl Sakura took a swing at Naruto, but was surprised when he sidestepped it, and then pushed her down to the ground, more out of instinct than actual thought. This angered several of the other girls, and they proceeded to move in and attack the blonde boy. He would block the punches or divert them into another girl and thus avoid being injured. This went on for about 10 minutes. Until Irika entered the room to find Naruto in a defensive battle with the Sasuke fan club, made up of about 2/3 of the girls in the class. After watching this for a minute, he decided to stop the fight and chastise Naruto for starting a fight. But Azula recounted what had happened and got Naruto off the hook, well, sort of. He and the girls had to stay after school and write on the board about fighting in class. Azula had to stay afterwards for questioning Irika on his double standard of Naruto being beat up before, and the girls not having to stay after for attacking a fellow student. During the next few years, the Hokage learned that Naruto knew about the QB being sealed within him, and there wasn't much he could do. During that time, Azula had worked with Naruto on creating clones, and while he couldn't create just one, He was able to create dozens that were at least passable in a single pass. Also with her training he started to learn how to airbend. This surprised her since he seemed to be a natural with the kata she had taught him, based on what Aang had taught her to relax. She decided to wait on other kata until he was able to get this kata down. The thing that surprised her was that she intimately knew how to airbend, but didn't have the ability, like something of Aang was with her. The Hokage had declared, secretly, that the Uzumaki clan had a bloodline that allowed them to control fire and air more than any usual techniques. This information was only allowed to the elders and the clan council only. They did find it interesting that Naruto and Azula could control fire and Naruto could control air, but thought it would be good for village as a whole if they had children later. Also Azula caught Hinata peeking in on a training session of the two of them, and she forced her to join them. This worked out well for Azula in that it gave her leverage over the Hyuga clan and gave Naruto a new friend. While Hinata was shy at first, Azula scared that out of her, and over the next couple of months it was brought out that Hinata both wanted to thank Naruto for her rescue and to inform him that she had feelings for the boy. There was one exciting encounter with Hayashi, when he came to the training grounds where the trio were training. He acted angry, but Azula pointed out the pride in his eyes at his daughter's improvement. He couldn't deny the pride that Azula pointed out and actually admitted to it. He left with a smile on his face, and saying that his daughter was in good hands. A few days later Hinata actually beat Hanabi in a spar, much to the surprise of those in observance, except for maybe Hayashi. Uchiha Sasuke did happen upon the trio on several occasions to the point that Azula thought that he was actually spying on them. Sasuke of course denied it, but the scroll with his observations on it was the deciding factor of his guilt. He was warned about stealing clan secrets, and it was left at that. The day of the final exam found Naruto ranked in the middle of the class, while Azula and Hinata were both hiding their skills to make sure that they also were in the middle of the pack. This had disturbed quite a bit of the village that Naruto was doing so well, but the Hokage kept things under wraps, mostly to keep Azula from burning down half the village. He had seen an errant jounin piss of the girl and watched, as she sent a lightning bolt into the hapless man. The biggest problem for the Hokage was, who was going to be on which teams. He thought about splitting up the trio, but also found that he had other problems. Several of the jounin instructors wanted certain students, but he also had to balance out the teams. Kakashi wanted both Naruto and Sasuke, since he figured that either Azula or Hinata would be on the team, but that would truly be an assault team without par. There also seemed to be a rivalry between both boys that seemed to go deeper than just a playground rivalry. Even Azula and Hinata expressed that they were not willing to be around the boy for extended periods of time if they could help it. Several of the instructors wanted to teach Azula, since she was considered a protege, but she was careful to keep most of her skills under wraps, so as to not garner as much attention as she did when she was the princess. Working with both girls had brought up Naruto's perception, and he noticed things differently than he did before. He noticed how superficial most of the girls in his class were, and he noticed that his previous crush on Sakura was just that, a crush that shouldn't have happened. He now tolerated the girl. He would only work with her in groups, since he believed that if he couldn't become a great shinobi initially, he would allow others to help him become great, while helping them out along the way. Naruto entered the classroom where Iruka and Mizuki were testing the prospective students in ninja techniques, since they had finished all other portions of the exit exams. He felt a wave of nausea wash over him, and he recognized it to be a genjutsu. He put his hands into a ram's seal and whispered, "Release." A wave of chakra washed over the room. "What was that, Naruto?" Iruka asked. Naruto scratched the back of his head and replied, "I felt a genjutsu, so I broke it. Now can we do this test?" Iruka shrugged his shoulders and nodded. "We need a substitution, a transformation and 3 clones for you to pass," Iruka explained. Naruto nodded, changed places with a chair and back again. He then changed into Iruka, Mizuki, Azula, and then the Hokage. He then created 9 clones that seemed to be nearly perfect. Iruka smiled, but Mizuki frowned and said, "We wanted only 3 clones, not 9, so I'm sorry, but you fail. Can't be done. I have too much chakra to create any fewer clones without them looking sick," Naruto explained. "I'm sorry, but the rules were that we needed 3 clones." Mizuki explained with a bored look. Naruto raised an eyebrow and then replied. So if I had the reserves of a jounin and the control of an academy student, you would punish me for not having the reserves of a student and the control of a jounin? Great, chakra control is a good thing, but it isn't everything. This confused both Chunin and Mizuki finally said. I don't make the rules. I can just tell you that you don't pass. I'm sorry, Naruto, but those are the rules. Naruto looked at Iruka and asked. How did I score on the written test? You got nearly 90%, Naruto. Why? Iruka asked in reply. And how was my weapons portion? Naruto asked, attempting to keep his anger under control. You did just as good as Sasuke in weapons, Iruka replied. So you're failing me because I did more than the recommended number of clones? Naruto asked angrily. Iruka looked at Mizuki, who just nodded and then said, I'm sorry, Naruto, but you were asked to do 3 clones, not 9. We can't pass you because of the rules. Naruto gave Iruka a sidelong glance that actually sent a chill down his spine. The boy left the room without any more comment. Sasuke smirked as he watched Naruto come out of the room without a headband and said, as Naruto went to his chair, So the dobe strikes again. We knew that you couldn't do it, Sakura added in. Naruto stood and left the classroom at a walking pace. Sakura smiled and said, Yeah, get out, you freak, and don't come back. Azula didn't know what was going on, but held her headband in a tight grip while glaring at the last Uchiha and his pink-haired fangirl. Hinata wore a worried look on her face, but didn't say anything, while she shared a glance with Azula. Both nodded at the same time. Iruka entered with a sour look on his face, but Mizuki had a slight smirk, with both Hinata and Azula caught immediately. Enough class, now congratulations on becoming shinobi of the leaf. Go outside and meet with your families, Iruka said in a lackluster voice. Outside there was a hustle and bustle of children showing off their headbands to their excited parents. Off in the distance a lone figure was rocking slowly on the rope swing in below a tree. Several of the onlookers made several derogatory comments towards Naruto, but also tiptoed around the subject of the Kyuubi, for fear of reprisal from the Hokage. Naruto looked up when a darker shadow eclipsed the partial sun under the tree. Naruto looked up to find a sad, but smiling Mizuki. What do you want, Mizuki-sensei? Mizuki sighed and then said, I know that Iruka and I were being hard, but that is our job, but I would like to talk to you about something special. Naruto nodded and followed the teacher away from the academy grounds, while the Hokage, Iruka, Azula and Hinata all frowned at the sight of Naruto following Mizuki. Azula found Naruto hitting a post a couple hours later, and could tell that he was really pissed, given the scorch marks on the post where his hands had hit it. He had the beginnings of firebending, but not the control, thus the reason she forbid him to practice until he had more control of the other styles. She heard him muttering about how stupid both of the teachers were, and how they wanted him to do a special project to let him pass. Azula rolled her eyes at this, but then an idea came to her head and she asked, What little project did they want my Naruto to do? And don't give me any garbage about it being secret. I'm your wife and all but name right now, so there are no secrets. Naruto sighed and recounted the story of what Mizuki had told him. A shiver ran down Naruto's spine when he saw the smile on her face. What do you want me to do? He asked timidly. I want you to follow through with the plan, but I will inform the Hokage of this, just to make sure that you are safe. My precious Naruto, she replied, while pulling him into a gentle kiss. Naruto had finished reading the note from the Hokage and copying several of the techniques from the scroll. Some were mildly scary, while others were just too scary to believe that Mizuki would want to take this scroll. Heck, Naruto was of the mind to challenge Mizuki to do one of the techniques, just to be rid of him. While he understood about the shadow clone technique, he didn't study it. He did, on the other hand, rest up and begin his breathing exercises. While Hinata and Azula waiting in the wings to help him with Mizuki when the Chunin arrived. What caught him off guard was Iruka showing up. He did his best to hide the surprise and tried to pass off this encounter as a fluke. So did I pass? I got the scroll from the old man with little problem and have learned a technique from the scroll, Naruto explained to Iruka, who wore a look of confusion. Azula and Hinata gently slapped their hands to their forehead in recognition of Naruto's acting stupid yet again. They watched from a distance to make sure that Irika and the expected Mizuki didn't overwhelm their Naruto. "What are you talking about, and why did you steal such a dangerous thing as the scroll of sealing, Naruto?" Irika asked. Irika had tried to push Naruto aside, but Naruto had just evaded him. As Naruto slid around Irika, his hands were covered in wind and the kunai that would have hit Irika were deflected. This confused Irika, since Naruto didn't call out any technique, he just seemed to move the air around him. Mizuki was surprised, but also annoyed that both the brat and Irika had avoided his attack. This was going to get harder, but an idea came to him. "Hand over the scroll, Naruto, and I'll let you in on a little secret that the whole village has kept from you your entire life," he said coyly. Naruto wore a look of excitement merged with longing, but Irika yelled, "No, Mizuki! It is forbidden!" "See, Irika doesn't want to tell you. You know why? Because the Kyuubi wasn't killed 12 years ago, it was sealed in you, so you're the Kyuubi," Mizuki hastily explained. Naruto wore a look of annoyance and then replied, "If that is the only secret, then you don't have to worry about me being the Kyuubi. I already know about the sealing. Eventually I will have to control the beast anyways, but you on the other hand are a traitor." A smile came across Naruto's face and a look of surprise came across Irika's. Suddenly Mizuki felt his legs give out from underneath him, and he was falling towards the ground. He quickly used his hands to catch his landing only to have to abandon his limb he would hang from, because a blue flame hit the spot where his hand just was. He hit the ground hard and then tried to get up only to find an angry Irika, Hinata, Azula and Naruto staring him down, all of them in an attack stance. A chill ran down Mizuki's spine when he felt wires suddenly wrap him up and a smirk on Naruto's face. "You demon! I won't let you kill me!" he exclaimed, only to go unconscious with a tap from Hinata to the back of his head. Naruto scratched the back of his head, while the Hokage smiled and took a drag on his pipe in his office. "So Naruto-kun, do you think that you're ready for the life of a shinobi? Mizuki is just the first of the people that you will have to deal with that are out to get you, and you being the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi won't help matters much," he explained. "Bring it, old man," Naruto exclaimed, much to the delight of both Azula and Hinata. Sarutobi smiled warmly and then said, "Very well then. For protecting the village against an enemy from within, I do hereby promote you, Uzumaki Naruto, Uzumaki Azula, and Hyuga Hinata to the rank of Genin. Just be sure to be at the academy for team assignments, and also look underneath to find the right answer." Aang was in deep thought about what had happened and had tried to find answers from his former lives. But none had ever been able to manipulate the energies of another, so he had set out a few years ago to try to figure out what had happened and find the lion turtle that had shown him how to bend energies. After years of searching with Katara and receiving notices from the three nations, fire, water and earth navies, they had finally found the roving island. Aang landed in front of the island and a massive head came out of the water. He then heard the voice in his head from the lion turtle, "You seek what was lost, but there is no way to return it. It has lost something, but still retains its life. It also took a little part of you with it, so if you look hard enough you will find what you're looking for." Aang looked confused, but then asked, "So if I look within myself for my missing piece then I will find her? You have grown young one. I will go on my way, now that you have your answer," the lion turtle said telepathically. Aang flew up to the airship that was waiting and yelled back to the turtle, "Thank you again!" He found Zuko, Mai, Toph, Sokka and Katara waiting for him on the landing pad. "So did you get the answer you've been looking for about my sister, Aang?" Zuko asked expectantly. "You'll need to give me a minute to see if what the lion turtle told me makes any sense or not," Aang replied and then sat down in a meditative pose. The others watched, as his tattoos began to glow and a slight wind kicked up around them. Aang found himself in the spirit world near the monkey who seemed to like to meditate. Aang slowly walked over to the monkey and took up a similar pose. "What are you doing back, child? I thought I had gotten rid of you. I mean you found your answer," the monkey said, while his eyes were closed. Aang took several minutes to answer but then said, "Yes, I did find what I was looking for at the time, the ocean and moon spirits in the mortal world, but now I'm looking for another part of myself and someone else. I'm sorry if I'm disturbing your meditation. This time you are not. I expected this to come, so I will work with you," You must seek your inner self and find the piece of you that is missing. Without knowledge of where it went, you will never be whole. The monkey explained. Aang nodded and both continued to meditate. Aang suddenly felt a slight glimmer from far away, but fought the urge to immediately look for it. Good, you have found it, and have not gone off blindly to find it. You must determine where it is. Can you do that, young avatar? The monkey asked. Aang concentrated harder and then felt the rifts between the spirit world and several other worlds. He mentally searched the rifts for residual energy from himself. On the seventh rift he felt the glimmer and felt a familiar energy coming from the rift. He then asked, "Can I speak with her?" "No, she is not enlightened enough to speak with you, but she will, over time, become enlightened, because of who she has come to be with. When they reach enlightenment, you will be able to speak with them. Until then, you will have to live with the fact that they are alive and are safe." The monkey explained. "You keep on saying they, but I'm only looking for Azula." Aang tried to explain. "Like I said, the one who she has cast her destiny with will also be able to talk with you eventually, young avatar. Now it is time to leave and take that insufferable panda with you," the monkey said with little anger in his voice, but also didn't open his eyes. Aang opened his eyes and saw a familiar panda waiting for him outside the meditation area. "Hi, bye. Time to go back," Aang explained, as he got up on the panda's back. They went to an archway and Aang dismounted the panda. "Bye, old friend, I'll visit you when I get a chance," Aang said while he began to disappear. Those gathered around the avatar watched, as the glow from his tattoos began to subside. Aang took a deep breath and then said, "Azula is alive, but she isn't here on this world, but she will eventually be able to contact us. We will have to give it time." Zuko sighed in relief and Mai hugged him in an attempt to console him. He smiled wearily, but nodded acknowledgement to the avatar. Naruto and Azula felt a presence at the back of their consciousness, but it was gone soon after it came. They shared a look, but continued to eat dinner. They conversed about how they were going to take on being genin, but Azula wasn't so sure about the test being all that it took to become a shinobi. "Naruto, why do you think that we will be put on teams? But also I'm sure that not all the teams become actual genin right away." "Why is that?" she asked. "I don't know. I would guess that the teams lack something," he replied thoughtfully. "So if you were on a team with, Kami forbid, the Uchiha boy, what would you do?" she asked pointedly. Naruto snickered and replied, "Probably the same thing you would do if Kiba was on your team. Put up with him and try to work with him, but also keep him in line." Azula smirked and put out her hand across the table, which Naruto quickly took and smiled back. "I don't know if it is love or just latent affection, but I do care about you, Naruto," she said sincerely. Naruto blushed and replied, "Being with you for the last few years has taught me some things, but also taught me that there is a lot I don't know. As for love, I think Hinata is teaching us about it, but I'm not sure how a trio fits in. I mean, I feel very strongly about both of you, but don't really know if I could pick between the two of you, and I think that people will have more of a problem if I'm dating and eventually marrying two girls instead of just one." Azula blushed, but then said, "What if you don't have to choose?" Naruto gasped at the question, but she continued, "I've talked to Hinata and we agreed that if she still feels the same when she is older, then you can marry both of us. I have talked to the Hokage and Hayashi about this. They don't see too much of a problem with it, other than the council's throwing up a fit. But if you're strong enough, you shouldn't have to worry about it." Naruto looked at the girl in front of him and was both confused and he thought he understood what was going on. Azula, for all of her bravado, was insecure when it came to her feelings towards Naruto, and thus she wanted the help of Hinata, who was by now her closest friend. While the three shared everything budding teenagers could, they didn't share their bodies, at least not yet. Both Naruto and Hinata knew about how Azula was and how she had changed thanks to both the Avatar and Hinata, but mostly due to Naruto. All three knew that mentally that Azula was about 6 years older than the others, but she took her younger body to be a sign that she had a chance to start over and didn't want to repeat the mistakes that caused Mai and Ty Lee to turn on her like they did. This was a sore spot for her, and both Naruto and Hinata went a long ways in healing this wound. She now knew that she was at fault for this, and that her friends did do the right thing. She had to also grudgingly admit that the Uchiha boy had also helped in showing her how she had acted before she had come to this world of shinobi and samurai. While Naruto was more for the training than the book learning portion of the schooling, Azula dug right in and had Naruto help her, both for her to learn and also to help bring him up to speed. Her favorite subject was history, but also she had learned that it was colored by the author and how they wanted to present the history. The best example was the Kyuubi attack. While the history books were sort of right. It took a lot of digging, but she had found out that Eri village was where the Uzumaki clan hailed from and that they were great seal masters. Also that an Uzumaki married the first Hokage. What really surprised her was that the hidden facts around her death, and the bringing of Uzumaki Kushina from the Eri village just before it fell. The third Hokage had tried to forbid her to do any more research into the subject. But Naruto had run interference on the subject and got him to accidentally spill that Kushina was his mother, and thus he allowed her to continue her research. While Naruto knew that Azula had figured out who his father was, she wasn't telling him just yet, so he was bided his time. They finished dinner and cleaned up the dishes. They had made it a habit of having dinner together since she had gotten her apartment next to his. They would trade off where they would eat. That also included Ichiraku ramen, which Naruto seemed to have an affliction for the stuff. While she had to admit it was good, she didn't think it was that good for him until she and the chief had a talk about what they did with the ingredients. She found out that he would put vegetables in the ramen and other items that would help him with his nutrition and with growing. She also knew that he hungered for the extra carbohydrates to keep up his energy reserves. The funny thing was that she had finally broken him of his habit of shying away from touch, and what it would be to lie down beside her when she needed his touch and he needed hers. She also found out that he wasn't shy, just unused to human touch. This had struck a chord in her. She and Hinata had decided to try to fix this in the boy, but Hinata had a similar problem with close contact with Naruto. But Azula fixed that by tying Hinata to Naruto for a whole day, while splashing water on her whenever she would pass out. Her reasoning was that if they were to be married, it wouldn't do for her to pass out when she got close to Naruto. It wouldn't be any fun for her for them to try to have children. She giggled at the memory. She even made it worse by having Naruto in a swimsuit and Hinata in a one-piece suit. Azula knew that Hinata was developing and she was sure that it would also break Naruto of his problems with close contact. "What are you laughing at, Azula?" Naruto asked. "Just remembering the weekend I tied you and Hinata together," she replied and then whistled happily. "That wasn't fair for Hinata-chan. You know she has a delicate condition," Naruto said, but the blush on his face betrayed that he actually liked the experience. "Who knew that Hinata was so developed for an 11-year-old? Azula asked with a smirk that betrayed her knowledge. Naruto wore a smirk of his own and replied, "You're not too far behind her, you know." Azula covered her chest for a second and glared at the blonde. "You peeked, didn't you?" "Why would I have to peek, since we take a shower together at least once a week?" Naruto asked with a serious look on his face. "Oh yeah, I forgot about that," Azula replied with a blush. She then got a wry grin and asked, "So are you going to take advantage of me? Since we sleep and shower together?" Naruto took a thinking pose and then replied, "Only if you want me to, but aren't we a little young to be playing those types of games? Wouldn't you get pregnant?" Azula shook her head and replied, "Not necessarily, since we have been taught techniques that can avert that possibility." "Is that all you're worried about?" Naruto shook his head and said, "No, but I don't think I'm ready just yet for that. I mean, even though I have these urges, I don't have to go with them, do I?" Azula shook her head and replied, "No, but it might be fun." She let her answer linger in the air for a moment, and saw that Naruto was actually contemplating them doing something risque. But then she saw him steel himself, and she smiled warmly at this, knowing that he would do what she wanted and try to make her happy, while she knew that she would try to make him happy. Then an idea crossed her mind. "Hey Naruto, you still have the instructions on that Jounin clone technique?" Naruto nodded his head, got up and pulled a scroll for the shelf on the wall. He had made it a habit to keep important things in Azula's apartment instead of his own. Nobody would break into her apartment for fear of being burned to a crisp, Jounin or not. He opened the scroll, sat down and began reading. Some of the techniques on the page downright scared him. Some required sacrifices, from the user's life to others' life, not what he wanted, so he skipped to a particular technique that was the first in the scroll. Shadow Clone Technique was the name. Azula read over his shoulder, but her eyes widened in surprise at the description. A Jounin level technique that required you to have at least high Chunin level of chakra, but also would divide the remaining chakra evenly over the clones and yourself. They both followed the instructions, but Azula had to abandon her attempts after about 10 minutes, even though she was actually really close. She was feeling the pull on her chakra and she could tell how little remained and thus gave up trying until her reserves had returned to their normal levels. She watched as Naruto shed his coat and continued to try to do the technique. Suddenly a second Naruto appeared, but both seemed to be breathing hard. Azula smirked, got up and kissed one, much to the annoyance of the other. The one who wasn't kissed growled and said, "Hey, you keep your mitts off my Azula-chan!" He jumped at the other Naruto, but was tapped on the chest by Azula and it disappeared in a puff of smoke. She smiled and said happily, "You got it, Naruto!" She then kissed him deeply. She broke the kiss and then smirked. "I didn't know that you were the jealous type, Naruto. That was a solid clone HM that has possibilities. I'm sure that Hinata and I could come up with a few possibilities," she said with a wry grin. "Not yet if I know what is going through that perverted mind of yours, Azula-chan. I really do think that Hinata-chan has corrupted you," he said offhandedly. She gave him a sidelong glance and replied, "Maybe it was me who corrupted her given my past, Naruto-kun." Naruto laughed at the statement, but then kissed her gently and asked, "Or is it just maybe I just got two perverts for girlfriends and fiancés?" Azula chuckled darkly and pulled him into the bedroom. "You want to see just how perverted I can be, the former ruler of the Fire Nation?" she asked wryly, as she finished pulling him into the bedroom, and then slammed the door shut. Naruto let out an eep and said, "Be gentle." In the Hokage's tower there was a meeting with the Hokage and several Jounin instructors. He took a long drag on his pipe and then began. "I have several dilemmas with this year's Genin. Now, no questions until we iron this out, especially you Kakashi." He gave the Jounin with his headband over his left eye a glare to stave off any arguments. He then continued. "As of yesterday we had a full class of 27 graduating Genin." This caused several to chuckle darkly. "Seeing as how Naruto was able to do a small job for me and show that he was skilled enough to be a shinobi, I am allowing him to also be in the graduating class. This will throw off our teams." Added to that is certain Jounin have asked for certain Genin to be on their teams. "Asuma, you requested the Nara, Akamichi and Yamanaka Genin for your team. Kurenai, you requested the Aburame, Inuzuka and the Hyuga on your team. Kakashi, you requested the Uchiha and Naruto, but didn't care who else you got. Genmai, you requested Ami, Azula, and Kuda." He let out a deep sigh and looked around the room. "All in all, I was hoping to put Naruto, Azula and Hyuga Hinata on the same team, but until last night I couldn't. I was going to give you all what you wanted, but with Naruto being odd man out, we have a problem. He now knows the Shadow Clone Technique. With this in his arsenal he will be a power to contend with." Hiruzen explained, "But Hokage-sama, the boy failed to pass the exams or so I heard." A Jounin exclaimed, "I talked to Irika and he was pained about what happened and what Naruto said before he left the testing room. Naruto was right. He was able to make 9 passable clones, but going by the letter of the rules he couldn't pass since there was no way he could control his chakra to such a fine extent to make just 3 of them and make them passable. Irika also told me that Naruto dismissed the genjutsu when he entered the room. We put so much in on being able to do the basics we lost sight of what a good shinobi should be able to do. Naruto, Azula and Hinata were able to capture a Chunin, unaided." This brought several gasps to the group. Kakashi then spoke up and asked, "They surprised Mizuki, didn't they?" "Yes and no, but also they worked together to defeat a Chunin and also protected another Chunin from injury. No matter what the decision on other Genin they will be passed. Am I understood?" he asked, but it was more of an order and the Jounin nodded. "So who did you assign to me in the first place?" Kakashi asked. "Yakitori Shinji and Haruno Sakura. While she lacks practical skills she has the academic background," Hiruzen replied. Kakashi took a thinking pose and then said, "While she might have the basics for book knowledge, I'm afraid of her attitude, and her practical abilities. That is your job as teacher, to teach all 3 genin how to work as a team. But there must initially be a connection, so that they will learn it as a skill and a way of being a shinobi of the leaf. We need to figure out what the team should be, and we won't leave until it is decided. Hiruzen explained. But if Naruto was odd man out, who is he displacing? Asuma asked. Azula sighed, as she looked at the sleeping boy next to her. While they didn't go all the way, she sure did try to push it. If it was her earlier life, she would have pushed it and made the boy hers. But she found it cute that he wanted to wait for a little while longer until their relationship made it to that level. She smirked at the frogs on his boxers and her in lace panties. They were opposites. Then there was Hinata, whom she knew wanted to be with Naruto. An even larger smirk came across her face, while thinking of her pale-eyed friend. I'll have to get her involved in these festivities, she thought to herself. Naruto lay there with a content smile on his face, while sleeping with Azula on his chest, only in lace panties. They had changed the sheet and showered to remove the bodily fluids that they had let loose while playing with each other. She let out a content sigh and was happy to have found a new life with people who accepted her. She curled up to Naruto and pulled the sheet over them both. She then quickly fell asleep. Naruto woke to an interesting sensation. He was feeling quite good, but also felt a hand down his boxers holding on to his little, now big soldier. Azula appeared to be asleep, but wouldn't seem to release him, so a devious plan came to mind. He rolled slightly, but that only started more problems. As Azula began to stroke him, he gasped in pleasure, but shifted, so that he was at least sitting, and gently pulled away her panties. He began to use his finger on her lips and she began to moan. Her hand didn't move any faster, but she didn't stop her ministrations. He then pushed his finger deeper, and she gave a loud moan. He watched, as her eyes fluttered open and she smiled warmly at him, and asked, "You're starting early this morning. Didn't get enough last night?" Naruto let out a stuttered sigh and pointed to her hand in his boxers. "No, you started it, so I'm going to finish it," he exclaimed, and then did his best to shift so that he had his face near her panties. She huffed when he pulled down her panties. "That's dirty down there. I don't mind your hands, but your mouth? I have to kiss that and you might give me an infection," she explained. Naruto created a shadow clone who went into the bathroom and returned after a minute with a wet towel and 2 glasses. She looked at the clone as if were crazy. "Here is some mouthwash for both of you and he can clean you, so that isn't dirty," the clone explained. Both gargled and then returned the glasses to the clone, who disappeared into the bathroom. She then removed her panties the rest of the way, while Naruto removed his boxers. She then tentatively asked, "Are you sure, Naruto? If we do this there will be no going back and it is still early." Her question was answered when she felt the towel gently rubbing her groin and the gentleness felt good to her already sensitive genitals. "I really don't know what I'm doing, Naruto," she said to the boy, while looking directly at his erection. She shrugged and began to slide her hand up and down. She then saw a small drip form on the tip. She smiled wryly and then took the tip into her mouth. She smirked even more when she heard him gasp. She let it fall from her mouth and asked, "Like that, do you?" She gasped when she got her answer in the form of a rough, but wet tongue touching her outer lips. She gasped at the ministration. "Guess you like it too," he replied. She knew that it was now war, so she once again took his erection into her mouth and began to bob her head up and down. All the while Naruto began to part her lower lips and licked a very sensitive spot. She guessed that he had found her clitoris and was enjoying the attention. She began to move faster and found that his ministrations became more erratic. She continued until she heard his breath become labored and his hips began to push his penis deeper into the back of her throat. He bucked once and she swallowed, just in time to take his first ejaculation down her throat. She continued to swallow until his penis stopped twitching. She then pulled away and sat back, only she forgot that this put her closer to his mouth. While she didn't regret doing this, it did surprise her when his tongue began to minister to her again, but very vigorously this time. It even penetrated her vaginal opening. She felt a tingle rising from her clitoris and moving up her body. She began to breathe heavily, and she began to move her hips uncontrollably. She then felt a tingling feeling moving throughout her body and she shuddered uncontrollably. She then felt like her body had just released a ton of tension. With one great heave she lost all control of her body and collapsed upon Naruto, blissfully unaware of anything. It took a couple minutes for her to realize that she was now on her back and Naruto was lying next to her, gently caressing her breast and side. She smiled warmly at the boy who had just brought her so much pleasure and had been her companion for the last 4 years. She knew then that she wanted to feel this good yet again, and she knew the boy could do that. She smiled warmly at the thought of spending the rest of her life with him. She didn't mind share with Hinata, since he was a bundle of energy, and would more than likely outlast both girl and the bed. She then noticed the smirk on his face and asked wryly, "Okay, Naruto, what are you thinking? Not going all the way?" She blushed profusely at the thought of actually having with him. It thrilled her, and yet it brought fear to her mind. Naruto chuckled and replied, "No, but it could be almost as much fun." And Lime, Naruto, Azula and Hinata all laid face down upon their desk, when Irika came in the classroom. He raised an eyebrow at this. The trio wouldn't usually come in this early, but since the other night's scuffle he was happy to see them there. He noticed they all wore different outfits than their usual. Naruto wore a burnt orange, white and black, striped camouflage pants and shirt. He also wore a bandolier of kunai over his chest. He also noticed the seal on each of the sheaths for the dozen or so kunai. He also noticed a black bandana covering his bright yellow hair. The only way he recognized Naruto was the whisker marks on his face, which was lying sideways on the desk. Azula had gotten a form-fitting brown shirt with red trim. Her pants seemed baggy, but he was sure that was more for mobility than for any other reason. The pants also had the same color combination, but she also wore a spiral on her right arm and on her back. Hinata had gotten rid of the baggy gray coat, and now wore a dark lavender and deep purple striped jacket. Her pants were pastel light lavender, but also sported several dark spots of either black or deep purple. Irika gathered the papers on his desk and noticed Sasuke giving the trio an occasional glare, but just shook it off and continued to get ready for class. He then heard a minor discussion going on between the trio. "You could have at least brought me in on it." Hinata whispered to Naruto and Azula, "Sorry Hinata-chan, but it just happened. I promised that we will bring you in next time." Naruto replied sleepily. "So how was it, Azula-chan?" Hinata asked, the depression almost evident in her voice. Azula looked at the girl and then smiled. "It is worth waiting for," she replied and watched, as Hinata's head hit the table with a thud and she knew that the girl was out cold. She then whispered, "Not a comment from you, Naruto, or no more for you." Naruto just nodded and appeared to go back to sleep. Irika looked up when he heard Naruto ask, "What can I do for you, Anbu-san?" Irika noticed an Anbu standing in front of the trio and also another standing next to him, holding a scroll. Irika took the scroll, opened it, and gasped. He then said, "Uzumaki Naruto, Uzumaki Azula, and Hyuga Hinata, Hokage-sama would like to speak with you three." All three stood and grabbed the Anbu's outstretched hand. All four disappeared in a swirl of leaves. "This is great. Now I have to postpone the reading of the teams until those three return," Irika thought to himself. He then dropped the scroll as he glanced out the window. Sasuke had watched the whole proceeding with muted interest, but when Irika looked out the window, he followed suit and said to no one in particular, "What the hell?" He was inside for the 4th time today. First it was the routine patrols, then his advisors, then the ANBU, and finally at the trio in front of him in his office. "What did you three think that you were doing?" he asked pointedly. "What do you mean, Gigi?" Naruto asked innocently. "The least you could have done was given me back my dark brown hair color of when they put my face upon the mountain," he replied, downtrodden and sounding sad. He then continued, "How did you even get my liver spots right?" He shook his head and glared at a giggling ANBU. Naruto looked out the window and at least had the decency to look surprised and asked, "Wow, who painted the mountain? They almost look lifelike." Hiruzen glared at the boy and replied, "I wonder." He then raised a hand to forestall any objections from the trio and continued, "This is why I didn't put you three on the same team. I don't want to go bald any quicker than I already am, but since you three seem to have so much energy, I'm assigning you to one team and a separate team for special occasions. You will meet your main sensei when you go back to the academy. He then looked at Hinata and said, I know you were going to defend them, but your father has already disavowed any knowledge of you being home after about 4 this morning, so don't start with me. Hinata blushed at being put in her place by the Hokage and him having seen through their ruse. The Hokage then continued, Well, you did a good job at painting the faces. I need it to be returned to its original form. You can do that after meeting your sensei. Your second sensei will work with you being a team, and I have special missions already lined up for you 3. Now get out of my sight. The 3 sprinted out of the room and down the hallway. He then spoke to the shadow to his left and said, So do you think that you can handle them? The class turned to the door when it slammed open and Naruto, Hinata and Azula entered the room. Only slightly winded, Irika glared at the trio, but only said, Nice stunt, but now take your seats, so you can receive your team assignments. All 3 nodded and had to find seats around the room. Naruto sighed when he had to sit next to Haruno Sakura and Uchiha Sasuke to her left. Hinata rolled her eyes when the choices were to either sit by Ami or by Kiba. She noticed the smirk on Azula's face when she took the seat near the Inuzuka, so Hinata took the seat next to Ami. Kiba smiled wildly. That was until he saw Azula holding up her left index finger near his face. But what really took the smile off his face was the blue flame flickering on said finger. He then heard her whisper, Not word, dog boy. He nodded his understanding and said nothing, and watched the flame go out with a smile on Azula's face. Irika sighed. Alright, here are your team assignments. Team 1 will be Ami, Kuda, and Uzumaki Azula, under Genma. Team 2, Team 7 will be Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto sighed, but hoped it wasn't the Uchiha. Haruno Sakura, he sighed, but Sakura slammed her head on the desk. And Uchiha Sasuke, Naruto, Hinata, and Azula all slammed their heads on their desks simultaneously. Sakura yelled with glee, while Ino sulked at this, but said nothing. Your sensei will be Hatake Kakashi. Team 8 will be Abirame Shino, Inuzuka Kiba and Hyuga Hinata. Your sensei will be Yuhi Kurenai. Team 10 will be Akamichi Choji, Nara Shikamaru, and Yamanaka Ino. Your Jounin instructor will be Sarutobi Azuma. Naruto sat in the chair annoyed. He had said goodbye to Azula and Hinata almost 2 hours ago. This sucks, not being with Azula-chan and Hinata-chan initially. Oh well, but having to put up with Sasuke. I'm sure I could work with Sakura, but it will not be a good time unless I can get that jerk to loosen up some, Naruto thought while he walked from the chair to the front of the room. What do you think you're doing, Naruto baka? Sakura asked in an annoyed tone. Naruto turned to his team and replied, I'm tired of waiting, so he will pay for being late since I have somewhere to be soon. Naruto had set an eraser up in the cusp of the door, waiting for someone to open the door for it to fall upon their head. He thought he saw someone out in the hallway, so he jumped back to the desk and squatted on the desk. The door opened and the eraser hit a man in a mask on the head while he looked at Naruto and said, The Hokage said that you were supposed to be meeting right now, but why are your team still here? He grabbed the eraser and tossed it at Naruto, who just ducked under it. One word, Hatake. Naruto replied in an annoyed tone. The ANBU shook his head and turned to the man in the hall and said, Senpai, you're making the Hokage angry with not meeting with your team. Get it over with. Naruto-san has somewhere to be right now. Didn't want to be hit by yet another Uzumaki prank. I was afraid that he might have trapped that eraser. Kakashi explained. Well, get your greeting done and over with, so that Naruto-san can meet with the Hokage. The ANBU said before he disappeared. Meet me on the roof. Kakashi ordered and then disappeared. Sakura looked as Naruto jumped out the window and asked, Where is he going? She turned to see that Sasuke had already left the room. She then ran after him yelling, Wait for me, Sasuke-kun. On the roof it appeared to be like an arboretum, with planted areas of shrubs and small trees covering the area. Naruto had walked up the wall and now sat waiting for the others to come up the stairs. Sasuke was first with a slightly winded Sakura just behind him. Kakashi coughed and brought attention to himself, sitting on the railing. Now that you're all here, let's introduce ourselves, he said in a happy tone. You mean who we are and a little about ourselves? Naruto asked. Yes, your likes, dislikes, and your dreams. Kakashi replied in a faraway tone. Naruto cleared his throat and said, I'm Uzumaki Naruto. I like Azula, Hinata, ramen, the Ikaraku's, bending. I don't like how long it takes for ramen to cook. Team over here spying on my clan's secrets, and people who come to a conclusion without knowing anything about someone. As for a dream, I want to be respected, acknowledged by the village and hopefully become the Hokage. Naruto had continued through even with Sakura trying to interrupt him with sputters and laughs. He turned to her and asked, How are we supposed to be a team if you laugh at my dreams? I bet you want to marry Sasuke over here and would be thrilled to date him if he ever gave any of you girls the time of day. All three males noticed the deep blush on Sakura's cheeks and the smirk on Sasuke's lips. Your turn, brooding turn happy, Kakashi said while pointing at Sasuke. I don't like many things, and dislike most things, Sasuke said, while Sakura began to swoon and Naruto just shook his head, but said nothing. Sasuke continued, My dream, no, my destiny is to rebuild my clan and kill a certain someone. Sakura had hearts in her eyes, but Naruto scowled and said, Well, you have enough followers to rebuild your clan. If you bed them all right now, you could have a running clan in about 12 years. But if you get killed going after that man, then you can kiss the clan goodbye. Sakura, angered by Naruto's speech, took a swing only to miss him and saw him nearly floating in the air. Naruto! She exclaimed. She saw Naruto smiling and pointing at her. What? She asked. Your turn, silly, Naruto replied happily. Sakura huffed and said, Fine. My name is Haruno Sakura my likes. She blushed and looked longingly at Sasuke, and then continued, My dreams are. She then began to squeal in delight. And her hobbies, like most of the girls around here, is to stalk team, but if he used it he could make it into a training situation. Naruto explained to a raised eyebrow from both Sasuke and Kakashi. Okay, now that we know each other, I need to explain your next test. Kakashi began to explain, only for Naruto to speak up. So Azula and I were right about the other test just being an initial test so that you guys can determine if the students have enough skills to be tested to be actual genin, Naruto said in an annoyed voice. Yes, you both were right, but the test the Jounin sensei will give are different for each team and will test them to see if they have what it takes to become actual shinobi of the leaf, Kakashi replied. So you want to test us as a team? Naruto asked, but earned a glare from Kakashi. I would advise that you all get some rest and not eat breakfast, because tomorrow's test will be one of survival. Meet me at Training Ground 7 at 6 in the morning, Kakashi said sternly. Okay, can I go now? Unfortunately, I have to clean up the Hokage monument. Even though I think they look good, Naruto said, but then saw Kakashi nod, but also the looks of surprise on the faces of his new teammates. Naruto leapt off the, When did he have time to do that? Sakura asked. It was done before you got to the academy. See you tomorrow, Kakashi replied and then disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto came running into the lobby just outside of the Hokage's office. He found a scowling Azula and Hinata. So how much trouble this time? He asked, as he took up a position in between both girls. My guess is that we will have to clean up our handiwork, Azula replied, but then chuckled. It is too bad, Azula-chan, Naruto-kun, we did such a good job without alerting the normal patrols. We knew we would be caught, Hinata said in admittance. A Chunin opened the door and ushered the trio in. The Hokage will see you now, the Chunin said before he let them and shut the door behind them. They looked up to see three figures, two standing and the Hokage sitting in his chair. Naruto, Hinata and Azula began to sweat. Kakashi was sitting next to Asuma, Kurenai, and the other prospective Jounin instructors. So how bad is it this time? Kakashi asked. I think that they are in for it. Pops won't go easy on them, Asuma admitted. So you have idea what they're in for? Kurenai asked. Nope, just know that the old man was really annoyed. And if I know him, he will have them cleaning the monument with toothbrushes, Asuma replied. Naruto swallowed hard while Hayashi glared at him. He knew he was in real trouble when Hayashi glared in that way. You disappoint me, Naruto-kun. While I'll admit that your work is top-rate, compared to your earlier work, it is disrespectful what you have done to the Hokage monument. The paint will make it weather quicker than normal. Also, we cannot have such displays for foreign dignitaries. It will show decadence and will not go over well with our allies or our enemies. We cannot show this type of weakness. Hayashi explained. Naruto growled, but said nothing. Azula smiled wryly at what Naruto did. Bear, please lead these genin to the monument to clean it off and meet their second sensei. Hiruzen asked, but it was more of an order. The man in the bear mask nodded and led the genin out of the room. He then turned to Hayashi and said, "It isn't that bad. But you are right that we shouldn't have our monument all gussied up. So how do you think they will take to their other sensei?" Hayashi asked with a smirk on his face. "Well, with the job I gave them, an ongoing C-rank mission, I hope they can lean from her. If she doesn't kill them first." Hiruzen replied with a chuckle. "Is she ready for a genin team?" Hayashi asked pointedly. "She knows what she is supposed to do. The other sensei are supposed to train them. If they don't, I will have words with them." Hiruzen replied assuredly. The trio and the ANBU arrived just above the monument, and found cleaning supplies waiting for them. Naruto began to laugh, but also look around. The ANBU asked Azula, "What is he looking for?" Azula chuckled and replied, "He's looking for a large supply of water, so we can steam clean the monument." The ANBU nodded, while Hinata followed Naruto to a small stream. She then pulled a good deal of water from the stream and over Azula, who in turn began some of her taijutsu form, and fire appeared below the water, as it went over her and the ANBU member. The water hit the monument, and immediately turned to steam. After a couple minutes of this, Naruto performed some of his own kata, and blew the steam away. The faces of the Hokages appeared, as if they were newly carved upon the mountain side. "Impressive," Barry ANBU said, and then whistled his being impressed. "Not bad, but you were supposed to use the tools that were left for you," a woman said, who walked out of the bushes. She was wearing a trench coat, a leather skirt, and fishnet shirt. Naruto rolled his eyes at the sight of the woman, but said nothing. Azula, on the other hand, glared at the woman and said, "Are you trying to seduce men?" The woman began to chuckle darkly, but then replied, "Or women, depends on the mission. The name's Mitarashi Anko, and I will be your second sensei. We will be working on several subjects. First and foremost will be how in the hell did you guys pull off this stunt?" It took 20 minutes for the trio to explain what they had done, but both Anko and the ANBU were impressed by the innovation and guile of the trio. Apparently the trio had studied the patrol routes for several weeks and had pinpointed when they changed and how they had changed. It appeared that the routes were changed bi-weekly and only differed a little bit each time, so you could almost predict what the routes were even when they changed them. "Good job, Gaki. Now for your continuing C-ranked mission, you are to continue to watch the routes and also work with me on ways to improve the defenses of Konoha," Anko explained. Naruto looked up at the woman and asked, "So why do we get special treatment and have two sensei?" Anko smiled and replied, "Because of the trouble you've been given most of the dimwits around the village. Since you guys seem to be able to avoid the patrols and not get caught when you pranks, we want to capitalize upon your skills. I actually like some of your pranks, but also want you guys to pull more and test the readiness of the village. You can consider it an order from the Hokage, but I have some people on my list if you want." "What have they done to you, Anko-sensei?" Naruto asked innocently. "Do you know who I am?" Anko asked. "Would you like all the nicknames or just a rundown of who you are and why you're not well received around the village like Naruto here?" Azula asked without anger or malice in her voice. "Just a rundown will be fine," Anko replied. "You're the former student of the Sannin, Orochimaru, a traitor to Konoha. You're a snake summoner, like Orochimaru, but your loyalty hasn't been questioned by the Hokage so far as I know, even though some other shinobi have questioned it." "No offense, sensei," Azula said with a bow. Anko smirked and replied, "None taken. Good job, Gaki. So you guys ready to do some more work on the defense of Konoha?" Anko clapped her hands together while she led the trio down the mountain. Naruto woke in a predicament. Hinata was on one shoulder and Azula was on the other. Even worse, they wouldn't move even though the alarm was blaring for their attention. While Azula wore next to nothing, Hinata wore a silk night robe, since she wasn't ready yet to take her affection with Naruto to the same level as Azula was. Naruto wore only boxers. The night before was them getting home late to Naruto's place, and then Azula whipping up a quick meal that surprisingly wasn't ramen. All three ate dinner quietly and then went off to bed. Hinata had decided to spend the night for several reasons. One, to keep an eye on Azula and make sure that she didn't take it too far just yet with Naruto. She also wanted to try to impress Naruto with being a little less formal, and try to woo him with her feminine woes. She had to force Naruto to watch her get undressed and then into her robe. Azula all the while licked her lips and thought of delicious ways to tempt the young heir into having a little fun with their Naruto-kun. It turned into a fun makeout session, where they lost their clothes, but only petting happened. Azula was satisfied, since Naruto was able to keep her entertained, while they also worked on the resolve of Hinata with a shadow clone of him. She nearly had given Naruto a blowjob, but failed to go ahead at the last minute. Azula accepted this and so did Naruto. He was actually tired since he had a mild fight with their new sensei, Anko. It really wasn't that mild. It did open their eyes though. Flashback. I hear that they're both yours, Gaki. Anko commented as they headed towards the Hokage Tower after going over their regular duties under her tutelage. No, I belong to them, since there is one of me and two of them. They had to agree to it for me to be with both of them. From what I learned from Azula and Hinata-chan, it isn't normal for there to be one man with multiple girlfriends, so while I love them both, they didn't want me to decide who would be my favorite, since it would cause us to fight and that would be dangerous for the village. Naruto explained, so you girls want to add another woman to the mix to train the Gaki in how to treat women? Anko said with a sly grin. Azula grinned evilly and replied, it would depend on the woman. I already am the alpha female in this, with Hinata-chan being the beta. I don't think you would want to be an omega, would you? Anko looked surprised at the girl and began to stutter out. I wasn't talking about myself. She then stopped, got her resolve back and said, I don't think that he has the stamina or the resolve to be my boyfriend alone, let alone have enough left over for you two young vixens. Hinata huffed and said angrily, he would have enough stamina to deal with all three of us at the same time. She then turned bright red and pulled her hood over her head to hide her face. Azula and Anko began to laugh, but Naruto turned bright red. Anko then poked Naruto and asked, so do you think you can take me? Naruto steeled himself and replied, I don't know if I could take you in bed, but I'm game to try to take you in the field. Anko smiled evilly and said, this training ground looks good enough. Let's go and see just how good you are. Nothing lethal, but if I win you become my whipping boy, if you win then I become your omega. Naruto shook his head and replied, no deal, I don't know you well enough to have an intimate relationship with you, sensei, but if I win we will take you out on a date. Anko appeared to contemplate this and then said, a foursome might be fun. She sauntered off on to the training field. Naruto rolled his eyes at this, since dealing with Azula had him more looking at what she was doing rather than shaking her, but, like most other males would think, because of this he didn't miss her pulling out a kunai and throwing it at him. Had he not been paying attention it would have hit him. She smiled and then said, good, you're paying attention. Now let's have some fun. Anko adopted a feral grin and pulled out several kunai. She began by throwing one at Naruto, then two and then three. Naruto switched to his defensive stance and moved his arm as if to block, but a small gust of wind moved the kunai to the side, thus avoiding him. He did this 2 more times, thus taking care of the 6th kunai and protecting himself. He wasn't ready for Anko to appear right in front of him and kick him in the stomach. Naruto reacted quickly and jumped up slightly while pushing his hands away from himself. This had the effect of propelling himself backwards, just as the blow hit, and thus softened the blow somewhat. It also hit Anko with a blast of air and knocked her down and backwards several feet before she tumbled into a standing position. Good move, Gaki. You lessened the blow, but understand that you're a genin and I'm a special jounin and we are on different levels entirely, so you'd better give up now and submit to being mine. Anko explained with a feral grin that scared all 3 genin. Naruto had rolled to his feet and took up a defensive stance. Come, Anko-sensei. We shall see the differences in our ability, he exclaimed. Anko ran at Naruto, but he appeared to be going through some kata, and then he pushed his hands towards Anko. A small horizontal tornado began to extend from Naruto's hands. Just as it was about to hit Anko, she disappeared. Naruto turned around and slid to the side and was missed by Anko's punch. He then ducked her backhand and moved behind the woman. She grabbed between her legs and pulled him under herself. He put his foot on her butt and pushed her. She flipped forward and turned during the flip. What color are my panties? Anko asked. Naruto growled and replied, Black. Good, you have situational awareness, but can you deal with this? She asked just before she disappeared. Naruto leaned back a little and saw Anko's left arm punch where he had just been. He then shifted the other direction and avoided her right fist. She then said, Good, almost Chunin abilities in avoidance, but you really have yet to attack. Naruto was now sweating from the exertion. He was playing a game of avoidance. Airbenders are famous for avoiding attacks and then striking like lightning when you least expect it. Azula explained to Hinata, whose mouth hung open. Time to step it up a level, Anko said. She then threw both fists at Naruto, who blocked them, pushed them out, and then did a double palm strike of his own. This sent Anko back a dozen meters, and she rolled for a few more meters after that. She stood up and yelled, Damn, Gaki! That was a good move, but did you have to hit me in the tits? That hurt. She took a minute to adjust herself, and then took an even more evil grin. Naruto began to worry, since he was hitting his limit of ability. He now needed to get creative. He moved his hands together, and then pushed them down violently. He soared up into the air just before Anko appeared through the dust and punched the area where Naruto had just been. She smiled at him, and then threw some shuriken at the airborne Naruto. Naruto smirked, and pushed his right hand across his torso, and he used the air he pushed to move him to his right, and thus the shuriken passed him by. He then pushed his hands towards Anko and sent a blast of air at her, and moved him farther away from her. He then performed a back flip and then landed softly, as if he landed with a cushion of air. He then blocked to the right and then to the left, sending kunai away from him and into the ground. He then fell to his back and spun around. Fire blazed from his feet. There was a scream. Hinata moved, and most of the stream beside her flew towards Naruto and doused the area, putting out the fire. Naruto and Azula ran towards the scream. Anko had thrown her trench coat off, and Naruto immediately pulled out his medical pack and a kunai from his pouch and cut her chain mail off of her. Azula took the cream from Naruto and began to apply the cream to areas that showed burns. Hinata pulled out a water skin and had it cover the burned areas. It began to glow blue, and Anko began to sigh in relief. Naruto pulled off his shirt and put it on Anko when Azula and Hinata had finished. Naruto then picked up Anko bridal style, and the trio ran off towards the hospital. I told you that you're not ready for firebending, Azula said authoritatively. Naruto nodded, but both girls noticed him stumbling as they approached the hospital. Azula took Anko's legs, while Hinata helped with the head. This sped them up, and they burst into the waiting room. A nurse looked them over and saw the headbands and showed them a gurney to put Anko on. Put her here. What happened? The nurse asked. She got burned in a training spar, Azula explained while Naruto showed a pained expression. The nurse lifted Anko's, Naruto's, shirt and wore a confused look. I don't see any injuries, or minor first-degree burns at the worst, the nurse explained. As she continued to look, she had nearly taken off the shirt to find a single burn. She only found light discoloration on the areas of the skin. Anko chuckled weakly and said, Guess you win, Gaki. Nice job, team. We have a medic in you, Pale Eyes. The nurse looked at Hinata questioningly and asked, What does she mean? I don't understand. Hinata-chan isn't a medic, but knows some healing and can use water to heal, Azula explained. The nurse looked on in awe. Here was a team that might be on par with the great Tsunade of the Sannin. Show me what you did on this light burn, please, she asked pleadingly. Hinata removed the cork from one of her water skins, and water flowed out and on to the burn. It began to glow blue, and the burns slowly healed. I will inform the Hokage about this and see if we can enroll you as a medic when you make Chunin, Hyuga-san, the nurse said. Anko looked at the dejected Naruto and said, Come here, Gaki. Naruto, still sulking at hurting his teacher and having used fire bending, when Azula had expressly forbid him from using it, walked to the side of the gurney. Anko sat up and the sheet dropped, revealing her bare chest. She wrapped Naruto in a hug and whispered into his ear, Good job, Gaki. Now learn from what I taught you tonight and use it tomorrow. People have it against the both of us and we need to use all that we can to get ahead. As for the whole dating thing, you can forget about it. You're too young for me and I was just messing with you. While I think you're a good kid, I don't need to be messing with your love life, and I think that Azula-chan would not get along with me too well if I did come into your love life. I got a guy on the side anyways. Remember that you can't take on a jounin alone, and don't tell anyone that I told you that. Got me? Naruto nodded and pulled the sheet up onto Anko's chest. He then said, "Thanks, Anko-sensei. So do we have to date our sensei?" Azula asked. Naruto shook his head and then Azula said, "Good, I'm not sure how I would deal with an old lady like her in our bed. I mean, while she has the stamina, she might change how we do things and ruin the fun." Anko smirked and gave Azula a wink, who just winked back, and the trio left the hospital. 20 minutes afterwards, the Hokage was standing at Anko's bedside. "So do you think they will be a good team?" he asked, not looking at the special jounin. "Hell yes, and the Gaki will only get stronger. I have only one question: why did you assign those two to Kakashi and Genma?" "I just know that they're going to fail them," Anko explained. The Hokage chuckled under his breath and replied, "If that happens, then you will be elevated to a full jounin, and they will be your students. Otherwise, I believe in the others and the children's ability to handle the situation. Now rest, Anko-chan." Naruto got home and was tired for being a usual bundle of energy. Azula had dragged Hinata along while sending a shadow clone off to inform the Hyuga that Hinata would not be home that night. End flashback. Naruto chuckled lightly at both memories. He extracted himself from the girls and went into the kitchen to fix breakfast. He stiffened when he felt breasts touch his back and then a pair of hands wrap around his waist. "Morning, Azula-chan," he called out lightly. Knowing that she wasn't wearing anything other than panties, he rose to the occasion. Azula, playing along, gripped the outside of his boxers and slid her hand up and down him some. "So on the table right now, my love?" Azula asked tauntingly. Naruto turned in her grasp and kissed her lightly, but wore a smirk that sent a chill down her spine. "If you really want to ruin breakfast and your chances at passing Genma-sensei's test, sure," Naruto answered devilishly. Azula's eyes went wide when he grabbed her by the back of the legs and lifted her to sit on the table. She began to panic, both with excitement and with trepidation. "I was just kidding, Naruto-kun. We aren't ready yet," she said in protest. He leaned her back and kissed her passionately, but then stood up straight and turned back to the stove. "Azula-chan, you're absolutely right. We can do that later. Did last night get you all hot and bothered?" he asked teasingly. "You know, if I didn't love you, I would beat you down and burn you to a crisp by now," she said in a mocking tone. "Yep, and wearing just that is more than enough to drive me to take you, but also I know that we need to wait," he said seriously. Hinata walked in, kissed Azula on the cheek and asked, "So do I need to clean the table before breakfast? Because of a quickie, or were you two playing around and not letting me have any of the fun?" Naruto turned and accepted a deep kiss from Hinata. "I think she is just in heat and doesn't know what to do," he replied teasingly. Azula grumbled, dropped her panties and began to twirl them on the end of her finger. "So now can we go?" she asked with a straight face. Naruto made a clone, who gathered Azula up, bridal style, and took her into the bedroom. "Go get cleaned up and take a cold shower, Azula-chan. We need to eat breakfast and be at the training grounds on time. While I might not need to, but you two do. I just don't know what to make of that Kakashi-sensei," he said lightly. Azula came out of the bedroom about 20 minutes later with only a towel wrapped around her head. Naruto smiled and asked, "Better?" Azula nodded, but also scowled and replied, "Yes, but I would have preferred you to be in the shower with me. We could have had some fun. Hinata-chan could have joined us also." Naruto shook his head and asked, "Hormones are really hitting you right now, aren't they?" Azula looked at Naruto, while she put the towel down on her chair and scooted into the table. "You might be right. I really want to screw your brains out, but also know better than to do that," she replied thoughtfully. "Well, eating at the table nude won't help you in not getting me to have with you," he said with a blank face. Azula looked down and saw that she wasn't wearing a towel around her torso and immediately got up and ran for the bedroom. Hinata sighed and said, "Do you think she did that on purpose or is just being emotional, Naruto-kun?" Naruto shook his head and replied, "Not sure, but do you want to share the shower to save some time?" Hinata turned beet red and asked, "But what if something happens? We will just have to make sure that nothing does, otherwise your father will kill me. Now finish up and meet me in the bathroom. I sent a shadow clone earlier to get you a change of clothes and to talk to your father. While he isn't happy about you being in front of me, he said that if nothing happens it is fine, since we are betrothed." Naruto explained. Naruto and Hinata took an uneventful shower and found a happy Azula dressed and ready to go when they entered the bedroom. Azula immediately took off the offending towels from Hinata and Naruto and said, "We're all family, so you don't need to hide." Naruto chuckled at Hinata blushing and her constant glancing at Naruto. All three left the apartment and headed to their respective training grounds. Naruto yawned lightly when he found his prospective teammates both sitting in the middle of the clearing. "Hi all," he proclaimed happily. "Too early to be so happy," Sakura said angrily. "Shut up, Dobe," Sasuke said angrily. "What? Did you guys not eat this morning?" he asked, only to be answered by two growling stomachs. He reached into his pouch and threw an energy bar to each of them. He then said, "You better eat that or we're going to be slaughtered by sensei." "But Kakashi-sensei said not to eat anything," Sakura said in their defense. "You really think that you can take on a jounin on an empty stomach? Heck, even on a full one, while fully rested?" Naruto asked. Sasuke grew contemplative, but Sakura answered, "I'm sure that Sasuke-kun could." Naruto sighed and then said, "We're genin, probationary at best. You think we have the skill, speed, or the experience to beat a jounin? What is your point, Dobe?" Sasuke asked angrily, while eating the bar given to him. Seeing this, Sakura ate her bar. "We need to work as a team to win, be on the team, whatever," Naruto replied in frustration. He then continued, "Get some rest and I'll wake you when he gets here. Given our last meeting you have about 2 hours to sleep, so use it wisely." Naruto sat down and took up a meditative pose. There was a gentle breeze that seemed to lull the others to sleep. This continued for about 2 hours. Naruto's eyes opened, and he got up. He walked over to Sasuke and Sakura and shook them lightly. "Wake up, he's here," Naruto said quietly, but got the attention of both of his teammates. Kakashi appeared in a puff of smoke and said, "Hi kids. Are you ready? What is this test about, Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto asked. "Well, to tell you the truth, you need to be tested and only about 66% pass to become actual genin, so we will have this test now. I have 2 bells. If you can get a bell you pass. If you don't you will be tied to the post and I will get to eat your lunch. I have a timer and you will have until noon to get a bell, but there are only 2 bells, Kakashi-sensei," Sakura said worriedly. "Like I said, only 2/3 end up passing this test," Kakashi explained. "So how many of us can become genin?" Naruto asked pointedly. "That is up to you, but if you don't get a bell you have no chance," Kakashi replied. He then said with some mirth in his voice, "You will have to come at me with the intent to kill to get one." Naruto took up a meditative pose and then said, "Whenever you're ready, sensei." Kakashi then smiled under his mask and thought, "Too easy. Go!" he exclaimed only to catch a kunai that came from the direction of Naruto. The kunai had been aimed at the middle of his head and he saw Naruto with his eyes closed and his arm extended, but the other 2 had disappeared. He then said, "I'm glad you're taking this seriously, Naruto, but you will have to do better than that." The boy sitting on the ground opened his eyes, smiled and said, "I already have." Kakashi felt a burning sensation under his glove and immediately threw the kunai up in the air. It exploded. He was now in a tree looking at the form of Naruto that appeared to only be a cloud at best. Distraction and attack, both in the same move, good. This might be interesting, he thought, but then looked around and noticed each of the 3's chakra signatures. Good, they have hidden themselves well. Wait. He turned to find Naruto crouched beside him in the tree. "You know for this exercise that I'm your enemy, right?" he asked in confusion. Naruto nodded and asked, "So is this supposed to be a test of teamwork? If so, I'm not sure if they would want to work with me. We'll see if they can or not." He then disappeared in a cloud of smoke. "Shadow clone? Now that is interesting," Kakashi said quietly. On another training field, Azula couldn't believe her luck. She had tried to get both of her supposed teammates to help in touching their sensei, but Ami just wanted to be in charge and Kuta was just happy oogling both girls. He had some skill, but failed to use it when they needed it. Right now she was really pissed, since she had given them an attack plan only for Ami to come in at the wrong angle and now she was wearing tattered and burned clothing, much to Kuta's joy. Luckily it didn't reveal that much. Her midriff, upper chest, and right hip were exposed, but that was all. She knew that Genma was a jounin and they couldn't take him individually. She was close, but she knew better. Every time she got close, Genma would use a saban to screw things up for them. Ami was stupid and wore a short skirt and no shorts under it, so when Genma had torn her skirt, she shrieked and ran for the woods. Azula rolled her eyes, tempted to fight the jounin if needed. She had finally taken a minute to get a sewing kit out and do a quick patch job on the skirt, and then berate the girl for not wearing shorts. It was funny though, since she had a bear emblem on the back of her panties. This was a distraction for Kuta, of course. So what do we do, Azula? Kuta asked. We need to all rush him, Ami answered. She then waved her hand around and said, and you can use that fire stuff, Azula. Azula rolled her eyes and then sighed. She then asked, so great and glorious leader, do we just rush blindly or do we execute a plan of some sort? I don't know, but we need to do it soon. I'm bushed and you guys don't look that good either, Ami replied. I have just one question, Azula said to the pair. She then continued when she was sure she had their attention. Can we work together as a team? Sure, if you do what I say, Ami replied in an arrogant tone. You do what you want, Kuta said angrily. He then got up and charged Genma with his wooden sword. Azula winced when the boy fell face first and skidded to within a meter of their sensei. She also saw the saban sticking out of his shoulder, knees, and wrists. 1 down, 2 to go. You have about 20 minutes left to actually touch me, Genma explained. Ami wrapped up an explosive tag and threw it at Genma, who just jumped away. Ami ran and attempted to circle around and attack the sensei from the rear, only to get a couple saban in the ankles and wrists. Azula raised her hands and left the bushes. I give, since I couldn't get them to work with me, Azula explained. Well, that is no fun, Genma replied. He then moved to the down genin and removed the saban. He then turned to Azula and said, would you care to explain why I'm failing the lot of you? Azula shrugged and replied, why not, like I've been trying to tell you too. We could never beat a jounin without surprise, luck and teamwork on our side, that is. She turned to Genma, who nodded agreement, so then she continued. We were put on a 3-man team to learn how to work together. We work together to cover our deficiencies, and when we are stronger we can then become more independent. While I might have been able to take Genma-sensei, it would have taken all my skill, all of Naruto's luck, and burning down half of this forest, more than likely killing myself in the process. What would that be worth? I couldn't even brag at that point that I had beaten a jounin. She sighed heavily and then slumped to a sitting position. She then smirked when she heard several explosions coming from another training ground. That your boyfriend at work? Genma asked. Azula chuckled and then replied, if it isn't, then I need a new boyfriend. Genma and Azula shared a chuckle, while the other two wore confused looks. Oh, Ami. Next time either go without panties to distract the enemies or wear some pants under the skirt, Azula said, looking in the direction of the continued explosions and smirking at the possible carnage. Naruto couldn't believe that both Sakura and Sasuke both refused his help. He had arrived just after Kakashi had put Sakura in a genjutsu, and he released her just to get a fist thrown at him. He then dug Sasuke out of a hole that apparently was the byproduct of an earth-style technique. After arguing with the pair for the better part of an hour, while his clones were playing tag, with real explosive tags, with their sensei, Kakashi. He was at his wit's end when Sasuke finally attacked. Kakashi was busy with one of Naruto's clones. Naruto finally went to a stone that had caught his attention. While it also had their supposed lunches there, he actually looked at the stone. Are you going after the lunches, Naruto? Kakashi asked. Naruto shook his head and asked, what is this stone with all the names on it? I don't recognize most if any of these names on it. Kakashi smiled inwardly, but wouldn't be fooled by the boy. He then explained, it is the memorial stone, dedicated to those who have died for the village. They are considered heroes for their sacrifice. Naruto looked intently at the stone, as if looking for a name, but he didn't seem to find it. He then grinned at Kakashi and said, "You would have probably tied me up if I tried to go after the lunches anyways. You have sort of stopped reading your book. I'm sorry if I've gotten too intense for you to be able to read," Kakashi chuckled and replied. "You and Sasuke have given me a challenge, but not too hard of one. So did it work in trying to talk them into helping you?" Naruto shook his head and then tilted it to the side, just being missed by a kunai that was aimed at Kakashi, who just grabbed it out of the air. He then jumped away from the stone, just as Sasuke exclaimed, "Fire style, grand fireball!" He then sighed heavily when Sasuke asked, "Why didn't you stay a moment longer, so that I could have hit him with that fireball?" "Team, I didn't want to be hit by your attack. Like I said before, we can't beat him in a straight fight individually." Naruto attempted to explain. "Yeah, but I touched a bell." "What have you done?" Sasuke asked harshly. Naruto pointed to the clearing where the ground was littered with smoldering holes and a few downed trees. "Nothing, not a thing, just waiting to be sent back to the academy, where you think everyone but you belongs," Naruto replied sarcastically. Sasuke grinned and then jumped off, but was caught by the scruff of the neck by a suddenly appearing Kakashi. The bell rang just then. "I guess time's up," Kakashi said while he dragged Sakura, who was in his other arm, to the posts a dozen meters away. He then promptly tied up Sakura. "But Kakashi-sensei," Sakura tried to say in protest. "No. You're brats. All you think about is yourselves," Kakashi said, only for Sasuke to rush at him. Kakashi quickly disarmed the boy and held a kunai to his throat. "Naruto kills Sakura or I will kill Sasuke," Kakashi said angrily. Naruto shook his head, making the pink-haired girl sigh, but then she turned Naruto and asked, "Please kill me if it will save Sasuke-kun, Naruto." Naruto growled at Sakura and said, "No, either option is wrong. Why do you think they put us on teams?" Kakashi sighed heavily and let Sasuke stand and join his possible teammates. "Sakura, Sasuke, you just don't seem to get it," he stated and then pointed at Sasuke and continued. "You feel that the others would get in your way, but you can't do it on your own. You are Genin and I'm Jounin. Even if our skill levels were equal, my experience would trump your skill. Sakura, you spend all your time worrying about Sasuke that you forgot to try to work with the person in front of you. Like Naruto told you, you need to work together. I've given you all a chance and the only one who passed my test was Naruto, who I'm recommending for passage on to another team. Sasuke and Sakura, you both are going back to the academy for a refresher course in teamwork. While it was interesting to see your abilities, I think you all have a long ways to go. I know Naruto knows this, but Sasuke, you need to get your head out of your ass and find a way to work with others or you will be dropped from the program. You Sakura, you need to work on your practical skills. Knowledge is a good thing, but if you don't have anything to back it up in the field, you and your team will die. Naruto, I'm impressed with your skills and your raw destructive power, but you need to learn subtlety. While you can see underneath the surface, you still need to be able to see underneath the underneath. We're done here. Go home and await the Hokage's ruling on your status." Dismissed. Kakashi disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto disappeared in a cloud of dust, but they could tell that he was running very fast. Sasuke put his hands in his pockets and walked off. Sakura remained tied to the post. "Am I so bad?" she thought to herself. Sakura felt a strong breeze and the ropes fell away from her. Naruto walked out and said, "Sakura, don't take it too hard, but you need to focus more on your training. I know you're strong, but you need to learn focus. If you want to impress Sasuke-chan, then you need to become a strong kunoichi instead of focusing on just him. It's just a suggestion." He then jumped back into the trees and the wind covered his trail. Sakura stood there looking down at the ropes on the ground. Naruto had returned to release her, but also advise her to become stronger. She thought he would discourage her from chasing Sasuke, but he didn't. He actually gave a possible good way to attract the Uchiha's eye. She then knew hard about what she needed to become a strong kunoichi. Naruto met Azula, Hinata and her team at Ichiraku's. Hinata smiled lightly and asked, "So how did it go?" Naruto chuckled and replied, No big surprise we failed, but I got a recommendation for advancement from Hatake Kakashi. From the look of your outfit, Azula-chan, I can assume that you failed also and caught one of your own fireballs trying to protect one of them. Azula nodded and closed her cloak to show off less skin. She then replied, Yeah, Ami came in for the attack at the wrong angle and I had to do a replacement with myself. Man, your team sucked, Kiba said excitedly. That's easy for you to say, Kiba. You guys at least know how to work in a team. I had Mr. Perfect and his #1 fangirl. Sasuke almost got it near the end, but I'm not sure if he realized that he needed help to complete the test. Sakura might get it now, after I told her to work on her training, instead of chasing after emo pants. Naruto explained, While that may be true, Uzumaki-san, didn't you try to work with both of them? Shino asked. Yeah, I spent most of the time delaying Kakashi, while I also tried to get them to understand. Naruto explained. Kiba looked at him in confusion and asked, How can you be in 2 places at the same time? Naruto crossed his hands with his index and middle finger and said, Shadow clone. A second Naruto appeared and walked over to Kiba. Kiba laughed and said, So what, a simple clone? I'm sure Kakashi would have seen through those. The original Naruto began to eat his ramen, while the clone flicked Kiba's forehead. I'm a solid clone and have about half the strength of the original, so the destruction was quite evident, since he can make about 1,000 of me before he starts to strain himself. The clone explained. Kiba's jaw dropped, but was pushed back up by Shino. I do not want you to catch any of my insects in your mouth, Kiba. Impressive, Naruto-san, Shino said. Naruto, Azula, Sasuke, Team 8, Kurenai, Anko, Genma and Kakashi stood before the Hokage. He sighed and then said, I'm happy, but also disappointed. Do you know why? He glared at Naruto, who had the good sense to keep his mouth shut and find something of interest on the ceiling to look at that moment. The Hokage then continued, I had 2 teams that I thought would pass, and what do I have? I have 2 solo members of both teams that understood the concept of teamwork, but a single member who by all rights should be put back into training has had someone pull rank and get him posted to an apprenticeship. This frustrates me to no ends. Uzumaki, Naruto and Azula both turned their attention to the Hokage and nodded. You both, according to your testers, showed that you understood teamwork, but also made an active attempt to correct and get your teams to pass the tests given to them. Also, you went beyond the call to even protect them from misguided attacks meant for your testers. Hiruzen explained, while Azula blushed, but also grimaced. He then continued, Naruto, you used a delaying tactic to try to get them to work together? Naruto nodded. And did considerable damage to the training grounds in the process? Naruto then blushed, but nodded. Hiruzen sighed heavily, but then continued. It pains me that you Uchiha Sasuke, who showed minimal in Kakashi's explanation, aptitude for teamwork, they would just get in my way. Sasuke attempted to explain, only to be quieted by the killing intent from the Hokage. When I want your opinion, child, I will give it to you and then ask for it. Hiruzen explained. The Hokage then continued. Both the daimyo and the council have asked Hatake Kakashi to take you on as an apprentice, but you will need to work with other teams to get the experience you will need to become a chunin and then have more independent missions. For now you are his apprentice, but do not question his or my assignments. Sasuke nodded his acceptance, and left when the Hokage waved him to leave. Hiruzen then looked at Kakashi and asked, Do you think you can teach him? Or do you need him to take a refresher course? Kakashi stood at attention and replied, I think I can get him to shape up, but I will need to have a team to work with him. Hiruzen then smiled and the Jounin began to worry. He will work with other team, but he will also work with Anko's team. Naruto and Azula will be her students from this point on. She will also have rotating students help out with her team, so that they will have complete team. Sasuke will occasionally work with your team Anko, so please make sure that they do not kill him. He asked pointedly. Anko smirked and replied, Sure, I can make sure that they don't kill the punk, but what if I do? Hiruzen shook his head and just said, Anko, hurt him some? She asked meekly. Only if it is in training. Hiruzen replied in an annoyed tone. Anko then got giddy at the possibility of hurting the Uchiha boy. Naruto shook his head and then put his hand on Anko, who calmed quickly at the touch. Now, Team 8, you will be working mostly with Enko's team, 11. Hinata, since you've passed, you will be removed from the roles of Team 11, but don't fret, you will get to work with them from time to time, Hiruzen said reassuringly. Hinata seemed pleased, as did Kiba. Azula rolled her eyes at the Inuzuka's response, but said nothing. Now that is out of the way, you're all dismissed, Hiruzen said to all those in his office. He just hoped that they would take doing D-ranked missions so easily. Thanks for watching this video. You really enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow RaiderXV for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.